Welcome back to Void of Fears. Before we jump into today's story, I've got to ask for a quick favour. If you could smash that like button, drop a comment below, and hit subscribe if you haven't already. It seriously makes a huge difference. YouTube's algorithm loves that stuff, and it pushes my videos to new viewers who might dig these stories too. I really appreciate every single one of you who takes the time to do that. It means the world to me and helps keep this channel growing. Alright, enough of me rambling. Let's dive into today's story. For 40 years, I've investigated creatures that shouldn't exist. My name is Dr. Ian Mercer, and I've spent most of my adult life chasing shadows, following rumours, documenting the impossible. I've tracked alleged Bigfoot prints through Pacific Northwest forests where the trees grow so thick that noon looks like twilight. I've interviewed witnesses of lake monsters in Scotland, sitting in their living rooms as they described humps breaking the surface of ancient waters. I've examined blurry photographs of creatures that defy classification, spending hours with magnifying glasses and image analysis software, searching for the truth hidden in pixels and grain. In all that time, I've learned one fundamental truth that most people don't want to hear. Most monsters are just misunderstandings, tricks of light and shadow, stories that grew in the telling until they bore no resemblance to whatever sparked them in the first place. A bear walking on its hind legs becomes Bigfoot. A floating log becomes a sea serpent. Fear and darkness transform the mundane into the terrifying. But only one case ever made me question whether we're truly alone in understanding our world. Only one investigation ever made me wonder if maybe, just maybe, some of those old stories were trying to tell us something we desperately needed to hear. It started with a phone call on a grey November morning in 2019. I was in my office at the university, grading papers on cryptozoological methodology and contemplating an early retirement. My career had been respectable but not groundbreaking. I'd published papers, given lectures, appeared on a few documentaries, but I'd never found the evidence that would change the field. Never discovered proof of something that would make the scientific community take cryptozoology seriously. When my phone rang that morning, I almost didn't answer. The number was unfamiliar. Area code from West Virginia. Probably another enthusiast wanting to tell me about lights in the woods or strange sounds at night. But something made me pick up. Dr. Mercer. This is Sheriff Raymond Coulter from Grafton, West Virginia. I got your number from a colleague who said you're the man to talk to about unusual wildlife sightings. His voice carried that particular quality of a man who didn't want to believe what he was saying. I'd heard that tone before, the careful neutrality of someone trying to sound professional while discussing something that made them deeply uncomfortable. I'm listening, Sheriff. I've got 3 separate witnesses who have reported seeing something near the old Mercer Creek processing plant. Something large. Something with wings. Now, I know how that sounds, and believe me, I wouldn't be calling if these were just regular folks telling stories at the bar. But these witnesses are credible. A state trooper with 20 years on the force. A mine safety inspector. A geology professor from the university. I sat up straighter in my chair. Multiple witnesses from different backgrounds, all reporting the same phenomenon. That was unusual. That was worth paying attention to. What exactly did they see? That's the thing that got my attention, Doctor. They all described some kind of large winged creature, but they all said the same strange thing. This creature wasn't attacking anyone. It wasn't chasing cars or frightening livestock. It was just perched on the old smokestack at the plant, staring down at the northwest corner of the facility, just sitting there watching, like it was waiting for something. I felt a chill run down my spine. Consistent behavioral details across multiple independent witnesses. That suggested something real had happened, even if what that something was remained unclear. When did these sightings occur? First one was 8 days ago, state trooper, saw it on his night patrol. Then the mine inspector saw it 3 nights in a row after that. Professor saw it 2 nights ago and tried to photograph it, but her camera malfunctioned. All of them reported the same thing. Creature on the smokestack, watching the northwest corner, completely still. Doctor, I don't know what to make of this, but I figured you might. I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds before making my decision. Sheriff, I can be there tomorrow. Can you arrange for me to interview the witnesses? Already cleared it with them. They're eager to talk to someone who won't laugh them out of the room. I hung up and immediately started packing. My colleague, Professor Margaret Davis, stopped by my office as I was pulling reference books off my shelves. Ian, what's going on? Possible Mothman sighting in West Virginia. Multiple witnesses, consistent details. She raised an eyebrow. You're not seriously going to chase the Mothman legend? Ian, you're 3 years from retirement. Don't risk your reputation on folklore. Margaret, this is why I got into this field. Not to write papers and grade tests, but to investigate. To find out what's really happening when people see things they can't explain. She sighed. Just be careful, and for God's sake, don't let them make you look foolish. The flight to West Virginia gave me time to review what I knew about Mothman sightings. The original reports came from Point Pleasant in 1966 and 1967, culminating in the Silver Bridge collapse that killed 46 people. Witnesses described a large humanoid creature with wings and glowing red eyes. Some reports said it was 6 feet tall. Others claimed it was 7 or 8 feet. The wings were variously described as bat-like, bird-like, or something in between. After the bridge collapse, the sightings largely stopped in Point Pleasant, but reports continued sporadically across Appalachia and beyond. Most cryptozoologists dismissed Mothman as mass hysteria, a cultural phenomenon rather than a biological reality, but there was something about the consistency of certain details, the descriptions of those red eyes and the sense of dread witnesses reported, that had always intrigued me. I arrived in Grafton late afternoon and checked into a motel on the edge of town. The place had that worn, slightly sad quality of establishments in towns that had seen better days. The parking lot was mostly empty. Through my window I could see the mountains rising in the distance, their peaks already dusted with early snow. Grafton sat in a valley carved by the Tygat River, surrounded by the rolling Appalachian mountains that looked beautiful in autumn and absolutely forbidding in winter. It was one of those towns that time had slowly abandoned. Storefronts on Main Street were empty, windows papered over or broken. The railroad yard that once employed hundreds now sat rusting and silent. The younger generation had moved away to find work elsewhere, leaving behind the elderly and the stubborn. Sheriff Coulter met me at a diner called Martha's that evening. He was a weathered man in his late 50s with iron-grey hair and the cautious eyes of someone who'd seen enough of human nature to be surprised by very little. With him was Deputy Annie Thorne, a woman in her early 30s with sharp features and an even sharper mind. She had dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that assessed me carefully as we shook hands. "Appreciate you coming all this way, Dr. Mercer," Coulter said as we settled into a booth. "I know it's probably nothing, but it's got people spooked. Tell me about the town's relationship with the old plant," I said. "Any history there that might be relevant?" Thorne and Coulter exchanged glances. Thorne spoke first. "Mercy Creek processing plant is complicated for this town. It employed about 300 people at its peak in the 70s. Good jobs, union wages. People built lives around that plant. But there were always rumours, workers getting sick, strange accidents. Then, in 1987, it just closed. Company executives locked the doors one day and disappeared. EPA came in, declared it a contaminated site, put up warning signs, and that was it. Been sitting there ever since." "What kind of contamination?" Never got specific details, Coulter said. Just warnings about hazardous materials and structural instability. People pretty much leave it alone. Teenagers sometimes break in on dares, but mostly it's just forgotten. Except now something's watching it. If these witnesses are to be believed, yes. The coffee arrived and I was grateful for it, despite the fact it tasted like it had been sitting on the burner since breakfast. Outside the diner windows, darkness was falling over the town. Streetlights flickered on one by one, creating pools of yellow light in the growing gloom. Deputy Thorne, you were first responder to all 3 reports. What was your initial impression? She considered the question carefully. Honestly, I thought the first one was just Trooper Garrett seeing an owl or a large bird and his imagination filling in the rest. Night shift, isolated location, old plant that looks creepy, even in daylight. Easy to see something mundane and think it's strange. But then the mine inspector reported it. And then the professor. 3 different people, 3 different nights, all describing the same thing in the same location. That's when I started thinking maybe there was something to it. Were any of them aware of the previous sightings before they made their reports? No, we kept it quiet after the first one. Didn't want to influence any other potential witnesses, but they all came in independently with the same story. That was significant. True independent corroboration was rare in cryptozoology. Most sightings were contaminated by prior knowledge, by news reports or local gossip that shaped what people thought they'd seen. I'd like to interview each witness individually tomorrow, if that's possible. Already arranged, Coulter said. Trooper Garrett will meet you at 8 in the morning, Inspector Sutton at 10, Professor Castellano at noon. And I'd like to visit the plant site, get a sense of the geography, the sight lines. I'll take you myself, Thorne offered. Tomorrow afternoon, after your interviews. We talked for another hour, and I learned more about Grafton's history. The town had been founded in the 1850s, growing up around the railroad. It had survived the Civil War, the decline of the railroads, the collapse of the coal industry. But each blow left it smaller, quieter, more forgotten. The plant closure in 1987 had been particularly devastating. 300 jobs lost overnight, and no explanation given. People are still angry about it, Thorne said. My father worked there. He was a maintenance supervisor. One Friday afternoon, the company brass called everyone into the main building and told them the plant was closing immediately, gave them 2 weeks severance and told them to clear out their lockers. Dad died 5 years later. Heart attack officially, but I think it was really just a broken heart. He never got over losing that job. Never understood why they just abandoned the place. As I walked back to my motel that night, I thought about the Mothman appearing at an abandoned industrial site. There was something almost poetic about it, a creature of legend drawn to a place where human enterprise had failed and been forgotten. But poetry wasn't evidence, and I needed to stay objective. I spent that night reviewing my notes on Mothman sightings, looking for patterns. Most reports came from rural areas, often near water. Bridges were common locations, as were power plants and industrial facilities. Witnesses often reported feelings of dread or doom, as if the creature's presence was an omen of coming disaster. The Point Pleasant sightings had preceded the bridge collapse. There were reports from Chernobyl before the reactor explosion, though those were harder to verify. Fukushima before the earthquake and tsunami. Was there a pattern there? Or was I falling into the trap of confirmation bias, seeing connections because I wanted them to exist? I fell asleep with those questions turning in my mind. The next morning dawned cold and grey, with low clouds obscuring the mountain peaks. I met State Trooper Vincent Garrett at his home at 8 sharp. He lived alone in a small, well-maintained house on the edge of town. The interior was neat and orderly, everything in its place. Military precision, I thought. This was a man who valued structure and routine. Garrett was in his mid-40s, fit and professional, with short cropped dark hair going grey at the temples. He had the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in law enforcement, someone trained to observe and assess. He invited me in and offered coffee, which I accepted gratefully. "Thank you for agreeing to talk with me, Trooper Garrett. Call me Vince. And honestly, Doctor, I'm glad someone's taking this seriously. I know what I saw, but I also know how it sounds. A cop seeing monsters in the night. Not exactly good for the professional reputation." We sat in his living room, and I set up my recorder on the coffee table between us. "I want you to walk me through that night in as much detail as you can remember. Don't worry about how it sounds. Just tell me exactly what happened." Garrett nodded and took a sip of his coffee. "Wednesday night, November 6th. I was on patrol, doing my regular route along Route 50. It's pretty isolated out there at night, mostly forest and the old industrial areas. The plant sits about 100 yards off the road, behind a chain-link fence. I've driven past it thousands of times over the years. Never thought much about it." "What time was this?" 11:47. I remember because I checked my watch right after I saw it, thinking I needed to document the time for my report. I was driving south on 50, and my headlights swept across the plant as I came around a curve. That's when I saw it on the smokestack. "Describe what you saw." Garrett set down his coffee cup and leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "It was big. Bigger than any bird I've ever seen. And I've seen eagles and vultures in these mountains. The wings were folded against its body, but I could tell they were massive, maybe 15 feet across, maybe more. The body was humanoid in shape, but wrong somehow. The torso was too long, and the arms hung down in a way that didn't look right. They were too long, or jointed in the wrong places. I couldn't see details, just the silhouette against the night sky. And the eyes? That's what really got me. When my headlights hit it, the eyes reflected back. Bright red, like a deer's eyes do in headlights. But these were larger, much larger, maybe 6 inches across. They glowed with this deep red colour that didn't look natural. What was the creature doing? That's the strange part. It wasn't reacting to my headlights at all. It was completely focused on something below it, on the ground level of the plant. The northwest corner, near what used to be the administrative building. Its whole body was oriented toward that spot, head tilted down, absolutely still, like a statue. How long did you observe it? I stopped my car right there on the road, put it in park, grabbed my spotlight from the passenger seat. I kept the light on it for maybe 2 full minutes. It never moved, never looked at me, never reacted to the light, just kept staring down at that corner of the plant. Then I blinked, just a normal blink, and when I opened my eyes, it was gone. Completely gone. No movement, no sound of wings. Just vanished. Did you see any sign of where it went? Nothing. I scanned the area with my spotlight, checked the sky, the surrounding trees. Nothing. It was like it had never been there. How did you feel during this encounter? Garrett was quiet for a moment, his jaw working. This is the part that bothers me most, Doctor. I wasn't afraid of the creature itself. I mean, I was startled, confused, but I didn't feel like it was going to attack me. What scared me was what it was looking at. I felt this overwhelming sense that something was wrong with that plant, that there was danger there. It sounds crazy, but it was like the creature was trying to show me something. Like it was saying, look here, pay attention to this. But I was too focused on the creature itself to understand what it was trying to tell me. Did you investigate the area it was watching? I drove down there right up to the fence, shined my spotlight on the northwest corner. Didn't see anything unusual, just the old administrative building, broken windows, weeds growing up through cracks in the pavement. I filed a report with Sheriff Coulter, but I didn't know what else to do. Have you seen it since? No, just that one time. But I drive past there every night on patrol, and I always slow down, always check the smokestack. Nothing. It's like it showed up that one time to deliver a message, and now it's waiting to see if anyone understood. I thanked Garrett for his time and drove to meet Graham Sutton, the mine safety inspector. Sutton worked out of a small office in a building downtown that housed several state agencies. He was in his 50s, heavy-set with a thick beard, and he had the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades working in harsh conditions. "Come on in, Dr. Mercer. Want coffee? It's better than what you'll get at the diner." His office was cluttered with geological survey maps, safety equipment, and stacks of reports. Photos on the walls showed him at various mine sites, always wearing a hard hat and reflective vest. This was a man who understood industrial hazards, who made his living identifying dangers. "Sheriff Coulter said you saw the creature 3 nights in a row." "That's right, November 7th, 8th, and 9th. I was checking some old survey markers near the plant for a land assessment project. The markers are on the hillside about 200 yards from the plant, gives you a clear view of the whole facility." "What time were you there?" "Late evening, around 9 or 10 o'clock. I prefer working at night for this kind of thing. Less traffic, quieter, easier to focus. First night, I saw it right away. Couldn't miss it. This massive thing perched on top of the smokestack, wings folded, just sitting there like a gargoyle." "Same description as Trooper Garrett gave, large humanoid red eyes." "Exactly, but here's what got me. I saw it 3 nights in a row, always in the exact same position. Same spot on the smokestack, same posture, always looking down at the same area. That's not normal animal behavior. Birds don't perch in the same spot night after night like that. Animals move around, they hunt, they nest in different places. This thing was stationed there like it was on guard duty or surveillance." "Did you try to approach it?" Sutton nodded. "Second night, I got bold. I walked right up to the fence line, about 50 yards from the smokestack base. The creature didn't react, didn't fly away, didn't even look at me. Just kept staring down at that northwest corner. I tried to see what it was looking at, but from my angle I couldn't make out anything specific. Just the old building, overgrown grounds, the usual decay you'd expect from an abandoned facility." "What about the third night?" "I brought binoculars. High-powered ones I use for survey work. I wanted to get a better look at it. But here's the weird thing. When I looked at it through the binoculars, I couldn't focus properly. The image kept swimming, like heat distortion, even though it was cold that night. I could see it with my naked eyes just fine, but through magnification, it became unclear. And I felt dizzy, nauseous. Had to put the binoculars down." That was an interesting detail. Some witnesses of anomalous phenomena reported difficulty photographing or recording it, as if it somehow interfered with technology or perception. "Did you feel threatened?" "No, that's the strange part. I felt worried, but not because of the creature. I felt worried about what it was watching. I'm a mine safety inspector, Doctor. My job is identifying hidden dangers, things that could kill people if they're not addressed. And standing there watching that creature watch the plant, I felt like I was missing something critical, like there was a danger right in front of me that I wasn't seeing." "Did you report it?" "After the third night, yes. Went straight to Sheriff Coulter's office and filed a report. He told me 2 other people had seen the same thing, which made me feel less crazy, but also more concerned. If 3 different people are all seeing this, all getting the same feeling that something's wrong, maybe we should be paying attention." My final interview was with Professor Diana Castellano at noon. We met at the university in her office, which was filled with rock samples, geological maps, and academic papers. She was in her early 40s, intense and precise, with sharp intelligence evident in every word she spoke. "Dr. Mercer, I appreciate you taking this seriously. I'm a scientist. I study rocks and geological formations. I don't believe in monsters or supernatural phenomena, but I also can't deny what I saw." "Tell me about your sighting." "November 11th, 2 nights ago. I was doing some mineral surveys near the plant site. I'm working on a research project about rare earth mineral deposits in this region, and historical records suggested the Mercer Creek area might have interesting formations. I was set up on the hillside with my equipment around 10:30 at night. Why so late? Less electromagnetic interference for some of my instruments. And honestly, I like working at night. It's peaceful, I can concentrate. I had my equipment set up and was taking readings when I saw movement on the smokestack. At first, I thought it was a large bird, maybe an owl. But as I watched, I realized it was far too large, and the way it moved, settling into position, folding those enormous wings. It wasn't like any bird I'd ever seen. You attempted to photograph it. Castellano's expression darkened. Yes, I had my camera with me, a high-end digital SLR with a telephoto lens. I take a lot of geological photographs, so I always have good equipment. I started shooting as soon as I saw it, must have taken 40 or 50 pictures over the course of about 10 minutes. She turned to her computer and pulled up a folder. Every single shot came out like this. The screen filled with image after image of pure white. Not overexposed, not blurred, just completely white frames as if the sensor had been overwhelmed by light. There was no light source, she said. It was after 10 at night. The only illumination was my equipment's LED display and ambient light from the town in the distance. But every picture came out blank. Everyone except this. She clicked to the final image in the sequence. It was degraded and unclear, but unmistakable. A dark silhouette against the night sky, wings spread wide, at least 15 feet across, perched on the smokestack. The image quality was too poor to make out specific features, but the size and general shape were exactly as described by the other witnesses. This is the only one that captured anything, and I have no explanation for why the others failed. I checked my camera, tested it the next day. Works perfectly, but those 49 images are just blank. How did you feel during the encounter? Frustrated at first because of the camera malfunction, but as I watched it, I started feeling something else. Dread. A sense that something terrible was about to happen, or had already happened, and I was too blind to see it. The creature wasn't looking at me. It was completely focused on the plant, on one specific area. And I felt like it was trying to communicate something, trying to point out something critical that I was missing. Did you investigate the area afterward? I drove past it the next morning in daylight. Looked perfectly ordinary, just an abandoned industrial site. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong there, something hidden. After the interviews, Deputy Thorne picked me up and drove me out to the plant. The access road was crumbling asphalt that wound through dense forest. As we came around a final curve, the facility appeared through the trees. The Mercer Creek processing plant looked like something from another era, a sprawling complex of brick buildings and rusting metal structures that nature was slowly reclaiming. The main smokestack rose nearly 200 feet into the air, its shadow stretching across the compound like a sundial, marking the passage of abandoned time. Broken windows stared out like empty eyes. Ivy and wild grapevines covered entire walls. Warning signs about contamination and structural instability were posted every few yards along the chain-link fence. That's where they all saw it, Thorne said, pointing to the smokestack, right at the top. I pulled out my camera and took several photographs, documenting the sightlines from various angles. From the road where Trooper Garrett had been, you had a clear view of the smokestack. From the hillside where Sutton and Castellano had been positioned, you could see the entire facility laid out below. Show me the northwest corner, the area the creature was watching. We walked along the fence line until we reached the section nearest to the old administrative building. It was a 3-story brick structure with most of its windows broken out. The door had been chained shut, though the lock looked rusted and weak. The ground around it was overgrown with weeds and small trees. At first glance, It looked no different from any other part of the abandoned facility, but something about it bothered me. Maybe it was the power of suggestion from the witnesses, but I felt a creeping unease looking at that building, like there was something wrong with it that I couldn't quite identify. Has anyone been inside since the plant closed? Not officially. EPA did an initial survey when it closed, declared it a hazardous site, and that was it. Teenagers break in sometimes, but they usually stick to the main processing buildings. More dramatic, better for their social media posts. I'd like to get inside. Is that possible? Thorne looked at the building, then back at me. Officially, no, the site is off limits. But I could speak to Sheriff Coulter. If you think there's something there, something connected to these sightings, he might authorize an inspection. 3 credible witnesses saw something unusual, all focused on this specific location. I think that warrants investigation. That evening I sat in my motel room reviewing my notes and the recordings from the interviews. 3 witnesses, 3 consistent accounts. A large winged humanoid creature with glowing red eyes perched on the smokestack, completely focused on the northwest corner of the facility. None of them felt threatened by the creature itself, but all felt a sense of dread about what it was watching. The physical evidence was minimal. One partially successful photograph showing a dark silhouette that could potentially be explained as a large bird or an artifact of camera malfunction. The failed photographs were interesting, but not conclusive. Cameras malfunction for mundane reasons all the time, but the consistency of the behavioral description was compelling. This wasn't a fleeting glimpse or an ambiguous shape. In the distance, all 3 witnesses had extended observations, and all reported the same unusual behavior, the creature maintaining a vigil over a specific location. I called an old colleague, Dr. Patricia Hendricks, who specialized in industrial accidents and environmental contamination. She taught at MIT and had access to databases I didn't. Ian, it's been too long. What can I do for you? I need information about a closed industrial facility in West Virginia, Mercer Creek processing plant in Grafton. It closed suddenly in 1987, and I can't find much in the public record about why. Give me a few minutes. I'll see what I can dig up. She called back 2 hours later, and her voice had changed. The casual friendliness was gone, replaced by careful professional concern. Ian, where did you hear about this place? I'm investigating some unusual sightings near the facility. Why? What did you find? Mercer Creek wasn't just a processing plant. According to some declassified documents I found in the Department of Energy archives, it was a front facility for classified nuclear research. They were extracting and refining thorium and uranium isotopes, testing experimental reactor designs. The program was called Nightfall Protocol. It was a Cold War project, part of the push to develop compact nuclear reactors for submarine and spacecraft propulsion. I felt cold. What happened to it? The program was shut down in 1986 after what the documents call a significant containment incident. Details are still mostly classified, but from what I can piece together, there were multiple radiation leaks and at least 3 deaths. The facility was ordered closed, and the site was supposed to be decommissioned properly, but based on these records, it looks like the company just walked away. Filed for bankruptcy, executives disappeared, and the whole thing got swept under the rug. Is there any indication the site was properly sealed? A long pause. No, in fact there's a notation here suggesting that full decommissioning would have been prohibitively expensive. The recommendation was to seal the surface access points and monitor long-term, but I don't see any records of ongoing monitoring. Patricia, if that facility wasn't properly decommissioned, if there's still active radioactive material there, then it's a ticking time bomb, especially if there's been structural decay over the past 30+ years. Ian, you need to alert the authorities. This is way beyond weird sightings. This is a legitimate public health emergency. I thanked her and immediately called Sheriff Coulter. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice heavy with sleep. Sheriff, it's Ian Mercer. I'm sorry to call so late, but I've discovered something about the Mercy Creek plant that you need to know immediately. I explained what Patricia had found. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Are you telling me there's radioactive contamination at that site? I'm telling you there might be an inadequately sealed nuclear facility under that plant, and if the containment has been degrading for 33 years, it could be actively leaking into the groundwater. Jesus Christ, okay. I'm calling EPA emergency response right now. Don't go near that plant until we get this sorted out. But I was already thinking about the Mothman, about its vigil over the northwest corner, about how all 3 witnesses reported the same overwhelming sense that something was wrong. What if it had been trying to warn them? What if this creature, whatever it was, had appeared to draw attention to a danger that humans had created and forgotten? I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Point Pleasant, about the Mothman sightings before the Silver Bridge collapse, about reports from Chernobyl before the reactor exploded, about Fukushima before the earthquake. What if there was a pattern? What if these appearances weren't random but targeted? What if something was trying to warn us about our own mistakes? The next morning, Sheriff Coulter called an emergency meeting at his office. Present were myself, Deputy Thorne, Walter Finch, the town historian, and representatives from the EPA who'd driven through the night from Charleston. Finch brought his files on the plant, everything he'd collected over the years. As he spread them across the conference table, I saw incident reports, medical records, testimonies from families of workers who'd died. I've been trying to get someone to investigate this place for 20 years, Finch said, his voice shaking with emotion. My brother worked there. He died 3 years after it closed. Cancer. 37 years old. His widow's still alive, still angry, still wondering why no one would listen when she said the plant killed him. The EPA representatives were grim-faced as they reviewed the documents. We're going to need to do an immediate site assessment. If there's active radioactive material there, this is a federal emergency. There's more, I said. I spoke with a researcher who accessed declassified documents about Nightfall Protocol. According to those documents, there were supposed to be 7 experimental reactor sites. Mercy Creek was one of them. The others were at locations that later experienced major disasters. Chernobyl, Fukushima, 3 others I'm still tracking down. Deputy Thorne leaned forward. You're saying what exactly? That these reactors caused those disasters? No, I'm saying that similar containment issues at those sites might have created conditions that contributed to later problems. Or at minimum, there's a pattern of inadequate oversight and dangerous negligence. These experimental reactors were built quickly during the Cold War, often without proper safety protocols, and then abandoned when the programs were shut down. Sheriff Coulter rubbed his face. And now one of them is sitting 3 miles outside my town, potentially leaking radiation into our water supply. Sheriff, when were the sightings reported? What dates exactly? He checked his notes. November 6th through 11th. I pulled up a weather forecast on my phone. Heavy rains are predicted to start November 18th, sustained precipitation for at least 4 days, the kind that could cause flooding in this valley. If the containment is already compromised, heavy flooding could cause a catastrophic breach. The room went silent. The creature appeared exactly 2 weeks before potential disaster, I said quietly, like it was giving us a warning, a chance to fix it before it's too late. One of the EPA representatives, a woman named Dr. Sandra Reeves, looked at me with barely concealed skepticism. Dr. Mercer, I appreciate your research, but I'm a scientist. I deal in measurable phenomena. I'm not going to base federal emergency response on reports of a cryptid. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to investigate a potentially hazardous site that has credible evidence of contamination. The sightings are just what drew our attention to it. But the danger is real, regardless of what anyone saw or didn't see. She's right, Sheriff Coulter said. Whether there's a creature or not, we need to know what's in that plant. If there's radiation leaking, my people need to know. We drink water from the Tigard River. Our kids play in that river. We've been living downstream from this thing for 33 years. Dr. Reeves nodded. Agreed. We'll start the site assessment today. But I want to be clear. This is going to take time. We need to bring in specialized equipment, radiation experts, structural engineers. If there is active nuclear material there, we can't just rush in. How much time do we have before the rains? Coulter asked. 1 week, I said, if the forecast is accurate. Deputy Thorne spoke up. We need to notify the town. People have a right to know. Not yet, Dr. Reeves said firmly. Not until we have confirmed data. I will not cause a panic based on speculation. We do the assessment first, then we determine the appropriate public response. But word leaked anyway. It always does in small towns. By that afternoon, rumours were spreading. Radiation at the old plant. Government cover-up. Deadly contamination. The story got more exaggerated with each telling. I got a call from a local news station requesting an interview. I declined, but that didn't stop them from running a story. Cryptozoologist. Claims Mothman warned of nuclear disaster. They made me sound like a crank, but at least it got people's attention. Thorne and I drove out to the plant that afternoon to watch the EPA team begin their work. They'd set up a perimeter, brought in mobile labs and detection equipment. Workers in hazmat suits moved methodically through the facility, taking readings and samples. We stood outside the fence, watching through binoculars. Thorne was quiet for a long time before speaking. Do you really think it was trying to warn us? The creature? I don't know what I think anymore. A week ago, I would have said no. Creatures don't warn humans. They don't think that way. But 3 reliable witnesses, all reporting the same behaviour, all directed at a site that turns out to have a legitimate, hidden danger. That's not coincidence. So what is it, some kind of guardian angel? Or something that's been watching humanity long enough to recognise the signs of our self-destructive behaviour? We build dangerous things, push the limits of technology, then abandon them when we're done. Maybe something noticed, maybe something decided to try and save us from ourselves. One of the EPA workers approached the fence and waved us over. It was Dr. Reeves, her face grim behind her respirator mask. We've confirmed elevated radiation levels. Not dangerous at this distance, but significant. We're using ground-penetrating radar and finding structural anomalies beneath the administrative building. There's definitely something down there that wasn't disclosed in the public records. Can you tell what it is? Not yet, but we're going to find out. I'm recommending an immediate evacuation of the 3 neighbourhoods closest to the river downstream from this site. Just a precaution until we know more. That evening, chaos descended on Grafton. Evacuation orders for 300 residents. News trucks arriving from Pittsburgh and Charleston. Angry town meetings where people demanded answers no one could give them yet. I sat in my motel room watching it all unfold and felt the weight of responsibility. If I hadn't come here, if I hadn't pushed for investigation, would they have discovered the danger in time? Or would the rains have come, the containment would have failed, and thousands of people would have been exposed? My phone rang. It was Margaret Davis from the university. Ian, I'm watching the news. What the hell is happening down there? We found an undisclosed nuclear facility under an abandoned processing plant. It's been leaking radiation into the groundwater for 3 decades, and it's about to get much worse. And the Mothman sightings? 3 witnesses saw something that made them pay attention to this site. Without those sightings, without them reporting what they saw, we wouldn't have found this in time. So you're saying the Mothman saved the town? I'm saying something got our attention when we needed it most. The EPA team worked around the clock for the next 3 days. On the 3rd day, they found the access point to the sublevel, a concealed hatch beneath debris in the administrative building. The underground facility was extensive, a maze of corridors and chambers that had been completely omitted from public records. At the centre of it all was Reactor Unit 7, exactly as Patricia's documents had described. An experimental thorium-based reactor that had been operating when the facility was abandoned. It hadn't been properly shut down. The fuel hadn't been removed. For 33 years it had been slowly degrading, leaking radioactive material into the surrounding soil and groundwater. The containment vessel was cracked. The cooling systems had failed decades ago. The structure was so unstable that engineers couldn't immediately access it without risk of collapse. Dr. Reeves gave a press conference that made national news. This is one of the most egregious cases of industrial negligence we've ever encountered. A functional nuclear reactor was simply abandoned, left to decay, with no monitoring or maintenance. If we hadn't discovered this when we did, the predicted flooding would likely have caused catastrophic containment failure. The radioactive contamination would have spread throughout the Tygat River watershed, affecting an estimated 50,000 people. Federal investigators descended on Grafton. They interviewed former plant workers, tracked down company executives, subpoenaed decades-old documents. Criminal charges were filed. Congressional hearings were scheduled. But the immediate priority was stabilization. The rains were coming in 3 days. Engineers worked frantically to reinforce the containment, to install emergency cooling systems, to prevent the disaster that was teetering on the edge of happening. It was delicate, dangerous work. One mistake could trigger exactly what they were trying to prevent. On the night before the rains were due to arrive, Thorne and I drove up to the hillside overlook where the witnesses had watched from. We sat in her cruiser watching the floodlights illuminating the plant as crews worked through the night. "You think it'll come back?" she asked. "The Mothman?" "I don't know. Its job is done. It got our attention. Now it's up to us to fix what we broke." We sat in silence, drinking coffee from a thermos, watching the frantic activity below. At 2:34 in the morning, Thorne suddenly grabbed my arm. "Ian, look." I followed her gaze to the smokestack, and there it was. The creature landed with impossible grace, wings spreading wide to catch itself before folding against its body. In the harsh glare of the floodlights, I could see it clearly for the first time. It was massive. The wings were at least 15 feet across, leathery membranes stretched between elongated finger bones, somewhere between bat and bird, but neither. The body was humanoid, but wrong. The torso too long, the arms hanging at angles that defied normal skeletal structure. The legs were powerful, built for perching, tipped with talons that gripped the metal of the smokestack. And the eyes. Those famous glowing red eyes, reflecting the light in a way that seemed to come from within, rather than mere reflection. They were large, alien, ancient, and they were looking directly at us. I felt no fear. That's what I remember most clearly. Looking at that impossible creature, something that shouldn't exist according to everything I'd been taught, I felt only profound sadness. Not from me, but from it. Like it was mourning. Like it had seen this story play out countless times before, and knew how it always ended. "It's so old," Thorne whispered beside me. She was crying silently, tears running down her cheeks. "God, Ian, can you feel it? It's ancient. It's been watching us for so long." The creature tilted its head, the movement disturbingly human. It looked at us, then down at the plant where the crews were working, then back to us. The message was clear. "We tried to warn you. We've always been trying to warn you. Will you finally listen?" Then it spread its wings, and I saw colours I don't have names for. Iridescent patterns that shifted and changed in the light, beautiful and terrible at once. It pushed off from the smokestack and soared upward in a tight spiral, climbing higher and higher until it vanished into the darkness above the floodlights. We sat there for a long time afterward, neither of us speaking. Finally, Thorne started the engine. "I don't think I can be a cop anymore," she said quietly. "Not after this. How do I go back to traffic stops and bar fights after seeing that? After knowing what I know now?" "You become Sheriff Coulter's replacement when he retires next year. You make sure this town remembers what almost happened here. You make damn sure it never happens again." She looked at me, her eyes red from crying. "Is that what you're going to do? Make sure people remember?" "I'm going to try." As we drove down from the hillside, Thorne's headlights caught something on the side of the road. She stopped, and we both got out. Near the base of the smokestack's access ladder, lying on the ground, was a single feather. It was nearly 2 feet long, black with that same iridescent quality we'd seen on the creature's wings. Thorne picked it up carefully, holding it like the precious evidence it was. "This is real," she said. "This is physical proof. People can't deny this." I thought about all the evidence over the years that had been dismissed, explained away, forgotten, but I didn't have the heart to tell her that. Instead, I said, "Keep it safe. We'll need it." The rains came the next morning, heavy and sustained, exactly as predicted. But by then, the emergency reinforcement was complete. The containment held. The reactor was stabilized. The disaster that should have happened didn't. The cleanup took months. The reactor was properly decommissioned, the radioactive material carefully removed and stored. The entire facility was demolished and entombed in concrete. The site was designated a Superfund cleanup location, with ongoing monitoring for the next century. The cost was $34 million in emergency response, but the alternative, if the containment had failed, would have been incalculable. 50,000 people with contaminated water, decades of environmental damage, hundreds of cancer cases, deaths that could never be undone. 3 witnesses saw something impossible, spoke up despite knowing they'd be ridiculed, and because they did, because someone listened, disaster was averted. The Mothman was never seen in Grafton again. 6 months later, I returned to the town. The evacuated neighbourhoods had been cleared to return. The river had been tested extensively and declared safe. Life was slowly returning to normal, or at least the new normal of a town that had looked into the abyss and stepped back just in time. Sheriff Coulter had announced his retirement. Deputy Thorne was running unopposed to replace him. I met her at what used to be the plant site, now just an expanse of concrete and warning signs promising 100 years of monitoring. "How are you?" I asked. "Different. This whole thing changed me, changed how I see the world. I can't unsee what I saw, can't unknow what I know now." "Regret it?" She thought about that. "No, I'd rather know the truth, even if it's terrifying, than live in comfortable ignorance. The question is, what do we do with that knowledge?" I'd been asking myself the same thing for months. I'd written up my findings, presented them at conferences, submitted papers to journals. The response had been mixed, as expected. Some colleagues were intrigued, others dismissive. A few accused me of fabricating evidence or being duped, but some listened, some understood. And that was what mattered. Walter Finch had compiled a complete history of the Mercer Creek plant, documenting everything, from its construction to its closure to our discovery. He'd interviewed former workers, gathered documents, created an archive that ensured the truth would never be buried again. "People need to remember," he told me. "Not just what happened here, but that it could happen anywhere. We built these dangerous things, then forgot about them. We let them threaten us, and we don't even realize it until something forces us to look." The black feather Thorne had found was sent to multiple laboratories for analysis. The results were extraordinary. The DNA was avian, but with sequences that didn't match any known species. Portions of the genetic code didn't align with anything in existing databases. The structure of the feather itself was unlike contemporary ornithology, with a design that one researcher described as evolutionary impossible. It's as if this creature evolved along a completely different pathway, one geneticist told me, or didn't evolve at all, but was always this way. I can't explain it, Dr. Mercer. By all our current understanding, this shouldn't exist. I spent months researching historical accounts of similar encounters worldwide. The pattern was undeniable once you knew to look for it. Throughout human history, there were reports of strange creatures appearing before disasters. Thunderbirds seen before earthquakes in Native American territories. Their appearances documented in oral histories going back centuries. Black dogs spotted before mining accidents in England and Wales, so consistent that miners developed superstitions about them. Shadow people reported before building collapses in Japan, mentioned in historical records dating back to the Edo period. Winged figures seen in the skies above Chernobyl in the weeks before the reactor exploded, documented in Soviet reports that were classified for decades. All dismissed as folklore, mass hysteria, cultural mythology. But what if our ancestors weren't wrong? What if they were paying attention to something we'd learned to ignore in our rush toward technological progress and rational materialism? I interviewed Margaret Whitehorse, a 92-year-old elder from the Lenape tribe, who'd lived her entire life in the Appalachian region. I travelled to her home in the mountains, a small cabin surrounded by forest, and she welcomed me with quiet grace. We sat on her porch as the sun set over the mountains, and I told her everything. The sightings, the discovery, the near disaster. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, looking out at the darkening forest. My grandmother told me about the teachers, she finally said. That's what we call them. Not warnings, not monsters. Teachers. She said the world is full of beings that exist between what you can see and what you refuse to believe. They've always been there, watching, trying to guide us. But we stopped listening. We decided we knew better, that our new ways were superior to the old wisdom. Do you think we can learn to listen again? She smiled sadly. Some will, most won't. That's always been the way. But the teachers keep trying, generation after generation. And that's what gives me hope. They haven't given up on us, even though we've given them every reason to. Why do they care? If they're so ancient, so powerful, why bother trying to save us? Because we're connected. All living things are connected. When we hurt ourselves, we hurt the world. When we destroy, we diminish everything. The teachers understand this in a way we've forgotten. They're not trying to save us out of love or compassion, though maybe there's some of that too. They're trying to maintain balance, to prevent the damage from spreading beyond repair. Are there others, besides the Mothman? Oh yes, many others. Some you'd recognize from stories, others you've never heard of because the stories were lost or never written down. They all serve the same purpose. They all try to show us where we've gone wrong, what we need to fix before it's too late. And when we don't listen, her expression grew somber. Then the disasters happen. The bridges fall, the reactors explode, the mines collapse, and the teachers mourn and wait and try again somewhere else, hoping that next time someone will pay attention. I left her cabin as stars were emerging in the clear mountain sky, feeling both humbled and terrified by the weight of what she'd told me. Back at the university, I compiled everything into a comprehensive report. The sightings, the investigation, the discovery, the near disaster. I presented it at a major cryptozoology conference knowing it would be controversial, knowing some would dismiss it entirely. The response was exactly what I expected. About a third of my colleagues were fascinated, seeing it as potential breakthrough evidence for cryptid research. Another third were skeptical but willing to consider the evidence. The final third were openly hostile. accusing me of poor methodology, confirmation bias, or outright fraud. But I'd expected that. The scientific community doesn't change its mind easily, especially about things that challenge fundamental assumptions. What mattered was that the conversation was happening. People were talking about it, debating it, investigating further, and some were listening. I received an email 3 months after my presentation from a researcher in Pennsylvania, Dr. Laura Morrison. She'd read my paper and wanted to share something. There had been multiple sightings of a large winged figure near a chemical plant outside Pittsburgh. The plant was 40 years old, built during an era of minimal regulation, repeatedly cited for safety violations but never properly addressed because the fines were cheaper than the fixes. The creature appears every night now, she wrote, always perched on the storage tanks, always watching the same section of the facility. Local residents are getting worried. After reading your paper, I thought you should know. I was on a plane to Pittsburgh the next day. The chemical plant was called Riverside Processing, and it sat on the banks of the Allegheny River. The sightings had been happening for 2 weeks. At least 8 independent witnesses, all describing the same thing: a large winged humanoid perched on the facility's storage tanks, completely still, watching. I met with the witnesses, interviewed them, documented their accounts. The descriptions matched Grafton, almost exactly. The behaviour was identical, and all of them reported the same sense of dread, the same feeling that something was terribly wrong. It took 3 days of investigation and some creative public pressure to get the state safety inspectors to do a thorough examination of the facility. What they found was shocking. The storage tanks, containing toxic chemicals, had corroded from the inside, their walls thinned to the point where failure was imminent. A rupture would have released thousands of gallons of carcinogenic material directly into the river, contaminating water supplies for Pittsburgh and communities downstream. Emergency repairs were ordered, the tanks were emptied and replaced. Another disaster averted, another warning heeded just in time. The sightings stopped as soon as the repairs began. I'm back in my office at the university now writing this account. It's been 8 months since Grafton, 3 months since Pittsburgh. My inbox is full of messages from people reporting similar sightings near industrial sites, aging infrastructure, places where human negligence has created hidden dangers. I can't investigate them all. I'm one person, and I'm not getting any younger. But I document what I can. Share information with researchers who will listen, try to convince authorities to take these warnings seriously before it's too late. The black feather from Grafton sits in a protective case on my desk, catching the light, reminding me of what I saw that night, reminding me that the world is stranger and more mysterious than we like to admit, that there are forces at work we don't understand, maybe can't understand, but that doesn't make them any less real. People ask me if I believe in the Mothman. It's the wrong question. Belief isn't the point. The question is, what if there are intelligences in this world older than our understanding, watching our mistakes, trying desperately to make us see? What if the real terror isn't what's out there in the dark, but what we refuse to acknowledge in the light? What if we've been so busy being afraid of monsters that we've missed the real message? We're the ones creating the disasters, and something has been trying to save us from ourselves. I keep a map on my wall now, marking locations of similar encounters throughout history. Red pins for confirmed sightings followed by disasters. Yellow pins for sightings where the danger was discovered and prevented. Blue pins for recent sightings still under investigation. The map is covered in pins. Hundreds of them scattered across every continent, going back centuries. Last week, I got a call from a sheriff in Ohio. Sightings near a dam that's been flagged for structural repairs for years, but never received adequate funding. The same pattern: creature watching, witnesses reporting dread, something trying to draw attention to hidden danger. I'm driving there tomorrow. Because here's what I've learned in my 40 years of investigating the impossible, crystallized into one undeniable truth. The scariest stories are never about the monsters. They're about us. Our negligence, our greed, our willingness to ignore danger until it's too late, our capacity to build things without considering the consequences, to profit without accepting responsibility, to move forward without looking back at what we've left behind. The Mothman isn't the terror, it's trying to save us from our own terror, from the disasters we create through short-sightedness and corporate greed, and the arrogant belief that technology will always bail us out. It's been screaming into the void for centuries, and we've only just started to listen. Tonight, I sit here surrounded by case files and photographs and testimonies from people who have seen things that changed them forever. Outside my window, the campus is dark and quiet. Students are in their dorms, sleeping peacefully, unaware of all the hidden dangers that surround us, all the ticking time bombs we've buried and forgotten. And somewhere out there, I know the teachers are watching, perched on smokestacks and towers and storage tanks, maintaining their vigil, waiting for the next disaster we're too blind to see, hoping that this time, maybe this time, someone will pay attention before it's too late. The question isn't whether the Mothman is real. The question is, when it appears, when something impossible shows up to point at the danger we've created, will we finally learn to look where it's pointing instead of just staring at the messenger? I don't know the answer, but I keep searching, keep documenting, keep trying to understand. Because somewhere between the legends and the truth, between what we can explain and what we refuse to see, there's a message we desperately need to hear. The teachers are patient. They've been patient for millennia, but time is running out, and there are so many places where the ground beneath our feet is crumbling, where the structures we've built are failing, where disasters wait in the darkness for us to finally notice. We build our towers and our reactors and our chemical plants. We push the boundaries of what's possible, always reaching for more. And when we're done, when the profit has been extracted and the usefulness has passed, we walk away. We leave our dangerous toys behind, half buried and forgotten, leaking their poison into the world. And something watches, something ancient and patient and inexplicably concerned with our survival. Something that appears in the night sky, with wings spread wide, pointing and warning and trying desperately to make us see. When the Mothman appears again, and it will, I hope someone is ready to listen. I hope we've learned that the warnings come with a deadline, that patience has limits, that even the teachers might eventually give up on students who refuse to learn. Because the next warning might be the last one we get. And if we miss it, if we're too distracted by arguing about whether the messenger is real, to see the message it's delivering, then the disasters we've been warned about will finally catch up with us. The bridges will fall, the reactors will fail, the dams will break, the tanks will rupture, and something ancient will watch from the darkness, mourning what we could have been, what we should have been, if only we'd learned to look where it was pointing. I think about that every day now. Every time I see news about aging infrastructure, corporate negligence, environmental damage. Every time I read about another disaster that no one could have predicted, that turns out to have had warning signs that were ignored. The teachers are still out there, still watching, still trying. The question is, are we finally ready to listen?